Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to wrap up the end of chapter 10 with moral development and the myth of the road of life. So let's start with moral development. That is something that developmental psychologists have tried to study. And you can imagine this is kind of loaded. So let's take a look at what that might look like. I'm going to read you a vignette. This is a famous case used to study moral development. It's about a man named Heinz. A woman was on her deathbed. There was one drug that the doctors said would save her. It was a form of radium that a druggist in the same town had recently discovered. The drug was expensive to make, but the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to produce. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it's cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. But the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's laboratory to steal the drug for his wife. Should Heinz have broken into the laboratory to steal the drug for his wife? Why or why not? So what do you think? Think about it for maybe a minute. Should he have done that? Phoenix says, "I think the man was right to break into the lab. His wife needs the medication more than the druggist needs an extra $1,000. Can we put a value on that? What is the value that's there? One thing is more valuable than another. One principle here. I think it's human life versus money. Those are different values. Annabelle says, yes, he should, because he's not harming anyone and he gets to save his wife, but he'll get some consequences. So the same idea there is value of human life. Any other thoughts? Anyone think that he shouldn't break in? Kaylin says, it's interesting how we always focus on whether or not someone should break the law to save lives instead of should someone be allowed to get away with killing people in the name of profit. That makes me think of the price of insulin in the United States. It's insulin is a drug that diabetics take, and it's necessary for life in the case of type 1 diabetes. And it's manufactured in the United States, but they can charge tons of money for it. And so people will ration insulin, and there's people who have died because they ran out of insulin. And Americans will actually drive up to Canada and purchase the insulin here for much less. So it's worth their trouble to drive up and cross the border and buy insulin in Canada and take it back to the United States. And guess where the insulin they sell in Canada is made? It's made in the United States, but we have more control on price. But if it's a life-saving drug, a company can charge a lot of money for it and people will still pay. And ultimately, who is the company accountable to? Are they accountable to the patients who are using the drug? Are they accountable to the public? Or are they accountable to their shareholders who want to see the profits? In practice, the accountability is often actually to the shareholders. Liam says, in my opinion, he was right to steal the drug. The druggist is greedy and does not care about the woman. Honestly, I would say that what the druggist did could be compared to an attempted murder. Right? He decided that money is more important than life. I feel that all medicine should be free. People charging insane amounts for medicine have valued their own enjoyment over other people's survival. True. They should have no choice but to give it for free if it is needed. I feel at the very least the government should pay for it and should demand that they only charge, like 1.2 times the cost to make it or something. There are countries that have those kind of controls and countries that don't. Sometimes it can be hard for us to understand the healthcare system in the United States, and seems kind of bizarre and scary, but it comes down to values, and they have in the United States, they have a very strong value of liberty. And they would say, I don't want the government making those kind of rules. I want to be free. And Kalen says apparently the price for insulin in the US has been capped. So maybe they've done something about that. I don't keep up with the news. I know it was a very big issue at a certain time, and they were like maybe charging something obscene per vial. Grace says, why would the druggist come up with a drug that saves lives and then refuses to allow it to save lives? Because his point is to make money. You can make money doing lots of things. Points out that the person who discovered insulin, that was Canadian researcher named Frederick Banting, refused to patent the drug as he felt it was morally wrong to charge a profit for such a life-saving drug. I think he gave it away for like $1 or something. And yeah, other people took advantage of what he did not take advantage of. Yes, so Phoenix is right. Yes, it's sad what happened. Given that many dogs died from the discovery. All right, so I'm getting a theme here, and people are saying that he should. It was the right thing to do to break into the lab because the pharmacist is greedy, and we need to save a life here. William says, even if you only care about money, it's down to the druggist not to sell it. He's making more money if he sells the drug for cheap than he does not sell it at all. That is true. But the point is, should he have broken into the laboratory or not? Does anyone think he shouldn't have done it for any reason whatsoever? Anyone want to play devil's advocate? All right, I'm going to conclude from the silence that we're all in favor of the break-in. Lawrence Kohlberg tried to apply Piaget's stages of cognitive development, moral development. And he posited that there were 6 stages of moral development, which he broke into 3 major stages. In the pre-conventional stage, it's kind of about focus on reward and punishment. At the conventional level, it's about what other people think. And then at the post-conventional level, it's about these more abstract principles and values. So the very first level is that you don't do a bad thing because the authority figure told you not to do it, and if you do it, they will punish you. They will kick you out of the Garden of Eden if you eat the apple, and then you'll have to suffer. The Stage 2 is apparently about doing it to please the authority figure and get a reward. So we will, maybe little children obey their parents because they want to get nice things from Santa at Christmas and not be on the naughty list and get a lump of coal. In stage 3, we want to conform and be a member of the group, and we accept the norms of the group. So we want to be like a good boy or a good girl or a good neighbor or a good student or a good employee or a good boss. And those are that's a way of thinking that's fundamentally submissive to some social norm about or social expectations about what it means to be a good girl or a good boy or a good wife or a good husband, etc. So it's not like the highest level of critical thinking about morality. The next step up is loyalty to law and order and rules and policies in our organizations and our nation. You know what the rules are, and we believe in following those rules. But laws are not always just. The Nuremberg laws in Hitler's Germany are not today considered just. People who were on trial after the Second World War had pleaded it was called the Nuremberg defense. They were just following superior orders. They were just being good soldiers. So a higher level would be sort of maybe trying to understand the spirit of the law. However, in the case of the Nazi laws, maybe the spirit of the law isn't just. But talking about justice gets to really abstract philosophical stuff, which is ultimately grounded in values. In stage 6, we would be able to see past more local definitions of justice and understand universal principles of ethics. That would be the highest level. Now, I see a comment in the chat. Phoenix says, I can understand why someone would say no. They might be someone who thinks the rules must be upheld no matter what for the good of everyone. And we could have different levels of moral reasoning with that same fundamental argument. So I'm not going to break the rules because I could get in trouble, would be the pre-conventional level. The conventional level would be to say, well, these are the laws and we follow the laws. And because there are groups' laws, it's our duty to obey. And then the post-conventional level of that same kind of argument would say, we have laws for a reason. It's about a social contract, and we really, in order to function as a society, need to uphold the social contract, even if it doesn't seem just. So maybe there could be some other way for Heinz to deal with this. Could this druggist have a professional organization that one could appeal to? I don't know. There's a lot of context that's missing from that case. But it's really meant to test your. Liam says this seems like the difference between alignments in Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played that. They are the different moral concepts, being that someone can be lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, lawful neutral, neutral, chaotic neutral, lawful evil, neutral evil, and chaotic evil. I've never played the game, so I don't know what that means. But it reminds me of something my daughter is reading. So let's see how we did. Where did you guys fall with your arguments? I think I was seeing this post-conventional morality. You were saying that the protection of life was a higher principle than profit, possibly laws that protect profit. Now, according to your textbook, I find it shocking. According to your textbook, most people do not reach the post-conventional stage. And reading that in the text, I find it hard to believe, but then some of the mythical things I've gone through in my own life, from other university faculty, stunned me. And yeah, some of the things that have happened to me made me think they're not at the level. So part of me can buy that. I still find that surprising. And all of you answered at that level, but then, only about 5 of you participated. So does that mean that the rest of the class was thinking something at the pre-conventional or conventional level? It's possible. But what I wanted to point out here is that it's not about, there isn't a right answer that says he should or shouldn't steal it. It's just looking at the level of complexity of the moral reasoning and whether you can work at the level of abstract principles and values. Liam says, a lawful good person would say that he should not steal the drug because theft is wrong. However, a chaotic good person would steal the drug, arguing that protecting life is of more importance than following a strict set of morals. Theft is only sometimes wrong. Yeah, okay, so your lawful good person in Dungeons and Dragons is at the conventional level of moral reasoning, and your chaotic good person sounds post-conventional. And I kind of get the chaotic thing because somebody that is at the post-conventional level of moral reason is going to be bucking an authority structure when they think it's wrong. And that could probably be interpreted by the authority figures as kind of chaotic or misbehavior. Authority figures generally don't like to for questions. So there's been criticisms of this. I think one of the best criticisms is that it has a low correlation with people's actual behavior. A good test should be predictive. However, something we know from social psychology, which we'll talk about later this week and next week, is that oftentimes personality tests of values, etc., don't predict people's behavior as nearly as much as we think they would, because actually situations have a really strong effect on what people do. Social norms, what everyone else is doing, conformity pressures, obedience pressures have a tremendous effect on behavior. So people could be at this post-conventional level of moral reasoning, and then because of all the reasons, all the forces that are on them actually act as if they're at the conventional level, because we live in systems where, we can be punished for not going along with it. And we're rewarded for going along with it. And because of this, pressures to conformity and obedience are very high. And Kaylin also points out that there's a difference in theory and practice, like in what you believe about yourself and what you actually go do. I agree, because there are systems of justice, reward and punishment set up to uphold a certain set of principles, and those are the principles of the authority structure. So I'm totally agree, Kaylin. There was a criticism that this could be sort of sex biased, that maybe it was biased against women because women have more of a caring orientation. It would sort of get them to maybe support the idea of stealing the drugs, and maybe men have more of a justice orientation. But this didn't pan out empirically. That sex difference that is hypothesized, that they then have a reason for, actually isn't empirically supported in the people can come up with criticisms. Maybe that. You've got to go and do some data collection, and the data doesn't support that. There's been a criticism that this could be biased towards more individualistic ways of thinking, because maybe questioning values and principles or being self-directed like that is an individualist thing to do, and maybe in collectivist societies, the highest ideal would be to do what other people are doing and to obey the authority figures and do the traditional thing. However, you should still, whether you agree with stealing the drug or not, you should be able to explain why. And so if a collectivist said, no, I'm not going to steal the drug, he shouldn't have broken in, they could still explain that at the post-conventional level. They still should be able to explain their feelings about why you follow the norms and values. So I don't see that as criticism. Another, I think, reasonable criticism is this could be actually confounded with intelligence. Like, what if this is a bit of an IQ test? And what if this is about simpler versus more complex ways of thinking? However, I don't see why intelligence shouldn't apply to morality. Like if intelligence is ultimately about processing information towards adaptive behavior, I think ethical behavior is adaptive. So I don't have a problem with the fact that this might be correlated with intelligence. One of the most interesting criticisms is that it assumes that reasoning predicts the reaction to the moral issue. And what if it isn't really about anything to do with logic or reason? And what if it's ultimately comes down to some kind of a gut feeling? And those gut feelings probably correspond to values. Psychologists are famous for measuring morality with trolley problems. I wonder if there's a whiteboard I could pull up, or maybe there's a pen, highlighter pen. I have a red pen here. Let's say that I'm really bad at drawing. Here's you have in a rail yard that is very, very poorly regulated. I don't know what you're doing past the fence, but there you are. How did you get so close to that lever? But you're in this situation. There's some kind of a trolley or a train that's going to be coming by. It's hurtling along. Can you guys see what I'm drawing? Well, I don't know if this is coming through. I'm trying to describe what I'm drawing while I'm drawing it. And it forks off, oh great, into two paths. And for other reasons that have to do with this incredibly poorly managed rail yard, there's a person on the tracks here. They're not going to have time to get away. I don't know how they got there, but they did. And there's a situation here too. On the other track, there's going to be like 5 people. And you find yourself in this situation, and you can decide which way the trolley goes. It's hard to draw with. I'm going to put like 3 people on this track. So you can pull the lever one way, and I'll hit this one person, or you can pull the lever this way, and it will hit 3 people. What are you going to do? Ugh. What would your choice be? You're in this situation. And maybe you can't even really see the people very closely. You see 1 figure or 3 figures. You know there's people. Hey, you can't stop the car. It's got this momentum. It's going to keep going. It's got to go down track A or track B. The only thing you get to decide is whether it goes down track A or track B. Yeah, Lillian says it's interesting how there's only 2 options in this thought experiment. the way I've set up the question. A lot of psychological tests are like that. They give you a sort of forced choice, and then the researcher assumes something from your choice in the forced choice situation. Okay, so Liam's going for the non-binary option. Like, think outside the box, find a way to stop it. Maybe throw yourself in front of it. Lillian says A, yeah, and then try to do something to get the person off the track. I think that's actually a pretty good solution. I like that. It would be harder to deal with 3 for sure. Now, let's say that you can't throw yourself in front of the trolley. You really, really, really only get to pick track A or B. So what I'm seeing in the chat is that you're all down with A. And so what's the value there? What's the value behind not knowing however, any other information? What's the value behind picking track A? Yeah, it's sort of a utilitarian argument. We want to save lives, let's go for 3 over 1. But now let's say we know a little bit more about the situation, and we're going to, let's go with what Raimi suggested there. He said, how old is the person on the A track? Now let's say the person on the A track is a toddler, and these 3 people are all 95. Does that change your answer? Okay. So if it's old people on the B track and a toddler on the A track, now we're going to kill the old people. That's not ageist. Well, it could depend on other things. Now, so if we, not knowing anything else but age, decide to go with track B, we might be thinking about years of potential life lost. Epidemiologists think in terms of years of potential life loss due to different decisions for treatment. And so if you kill the toddler could maybe live till 95. So there's 93 years of potential life lost. And let's say the 95-year-olds are way above average and you can't, they could die tomorrow of old age or illnesses. They, between them, maybe they have 3 potential years. You're not predicting any extra life left because they're already above the average life expectancy of, say, 85. So now by running over the old people, you have saved more years of life. Now, what else? Let's say I could come up with other variants of this problem. I could say, what if these 3 people are all condemned men on death row? And this is the Dalai Lama. And then you might choose to, I think the Dalai Lama would want you to save the condemned men. But ultimately, are you really making that decision? Well, it's not because of something rational or logical. It's value. Okay, the value of life, the value of years of potential life, the value of saving the condemned. It's really emotional. That said, I still think that those levels of reasoning show a function of intelligence and a depth of processing and understanding. So, um, throwing out the theory. Noah says, Lillian says, maybe it depends on whether you know the people or not. Yeah, so let's say that this one person is your mom, and these three people are strangers from a distant land. Like, maybe you see your mom. Noah says, I think the more interesting version of this problem is when the train will immediately go to the track with three, unless you act to switch. So you can be complacent and not act. Interesting. Yeah, because let's say you'd be like, I think a reasonably ethical position is, hey, I don't work at this rail yard. I'm not trained. This isn't my problem. You can just be a bystander. Yeah, see whether you step forward. We'll talk about bystander effects and helping next chapter. James says an interesting spin on this is one where you have to kill the people yourself. If you want to switch to the other group, you have to in front of the train yourself. There, again, we'll talk about this next unit on social psychology. People are sometimes less likely to do things that would be harmful if they had to get the blood on their own hands, if they would have to see the suffering themselves. That makes it all harder. It's actually easier to do violent things to people if you don't have to see it. People were much more likely to obey in the Milgram experiments. These are a set of experiments where researchers got people to think they were killing somebody, and they were way more likely to comply if there was more distance between them and the potential victim, distance and responsibility through getting someone else to do it. So if you sort of tell the assistant to do it, well, then, the assistant, not you. All right. That is moral development. Our last section is on kind of transitions in adulthood. So as people get older, they get more wrapped up often in their careers. What's a career? That's a good question. Your career is the combination and constellation of the public social roles that you take in your life course. Right now, I'm in a public social role as teacher. Right now, you are in a public social role as student teachers. No, not when you graduate and get your first job, right? Mother is kind of it's got a private side, but it's also a public social role. Many occupations and people's jobs really are about public social roles, but you can have a career without having a job. It's still about the course of your public life. Work in jobs consumes most people's adulthood. Most of us are not independently wealthy, so we have to have a job, and that could be like the majority of your time in your adult life. And so job satisfaction becomes important. Choosing the right job, making the right vocational choices are really important. Working somewhere where you're a good fit for the culture, because imagine if you worked in an organization whose values were antithetical to yours. How would you feel if you were working for Eli Lilly and the CEO wants to do price gouging for diabetics? You might not like that, or you might really like it if you were focused on maximizing profits for shareholders. When folks have kids, that takes up a lot of time and energy too, right? Maybe you go home from your job and then you see your kids and help them with their homework, and that's your day. You do that day in and day out until maybe you have a midlife crisis. The midlife crisis, I don't know if any of your dads have had a midlife crisis. That's where they leave for a younger woman and get a shiny car. They say, enough of this. Like, midlife crisis is a bit of a myth. I think it's more reasonable to say that if midlife crisis is a thing, it's not a function of age itself or maturation itself. It may be a function of experience. So people make choices, they get into situations, they become entrenched, and sometimes people step back and realize it wasn't right for them. Sometimes people have something happen like I say they devote themselves to their job and their organization, and they're suddenly laid off. Maybe they have a colleague drop dead from a heart attack, and they think, what is this all for? What am I doing? I think I might be having that. Is it an attempt to regain youth? Maybe it's a desire for freedom. But sometimes in life, people kind of find themselves wanting to hit a reset button or shift course. That can happen. Another thing you might have heard about is the idea of an empty nest syndrome, the idea that mothers could get depressed after their children leave home. This is more true if they're really committed to the parenting role and then suddenly the kids are gone. But that's kind of like with anything. It'd be the same if somebody's totally devoted to their job and then they retire and all of a sudden the tasks and the colleagues and the email is all shut off and gone. They can get depressed from that. You actually see there's a phenomenon where sometimes men get depressed after they retire. Generally speaking, people do better with big transitions the more adaptable they are. And transitions are normal and they can be expected, like children leaving home, when they can be unexpected, like getting laid off. And to get through transitions, you want to be adaptable. And what does adaptability mean? Well, it means that you're ready to use your resources, personal resources, interpersonal resources, resources in your friends, your family, and your community to do some skilled thing, right, to respond, to behave in a way that gets you the result you want. And adaptability is a skill and you'll develop it over your life. And the more adaptable you are, the less shocked you will be by transitions. There is a bit of a myth of the road of life. And in, I would say, most stereotypical version of the myth, you graduate high school and you have your first boyfriend or girlfriend by then. You went to prom with them. And then you go to university or vocational school and get your piece of paper. And then you go and get your job in an organization. And you start kind of climbing up the ladder. And you start getting longer vacations. And I don't know, maybe you get a house and then you upgrade the house. Maybe you become a manager. And at the end of it all, you retire with great savings. And you marry the love of your life, and that works out. What else? You remain healthy. You don't have any chronic conditions. Yeah, you don't develop a chronic illness. You don't have any accidents that you that may need to drastically redesign your life around. Company doesn't go under, you don't get laid off, you don't get divorced. You have 1.75 children and a dog, live in the suburbs, have a mortgage. Does that sound about right? Whenever there are expectations on you, you should ask, where are those expectations coming from? And are they in your best interests? This ultimate guide to life, which I found online, is Where does it come from? Who wrote this? Who do you think wrote this? Let's look at it. What are they interested in about you? Whether you're fulfilling your sense of calling, whether you're developing your skills, whether you are contributing to your community. An old person. Lillian says, it sounds like the socially constructed, capitalistic, heteronormative, patriarchal road of life. Love that. There's an interesting word there, capitalistic. Lillian, can you tell me why it's capitalistic? It's from some company called Amigo. I wonder what Amigo does. What could Amigo be about? And what does Amigo have going here? So I just Googled Amigo. You see it on the bottom there. Amigo Holdings is a guarantor, loans, or subprime lender. It's listed on the London Stock Exchange. Yeah, so it's from capitalists, for real. So how does this work for the capitalists? Yeah, you're going to buy and own property. So you're going to need a mortgage for that, right? Because where do you get like $500,000? You get a mortgage. What else are you going to need? Probably going to need a student loan because you're going to maybe go to university and it'll cost like, how much does it cost now? Like $50,000? Is that an underestimate? You'll be paying that off for years. How else can we tie you down with debt? You can get a car loan. Forget about walking or biking or using public transportation. Definitely buy a new car with a car loan. You're going to need some expensive holidays, right? But it's okay if you can't afford them because you have a credit card. And you're going to want to upgrade that house, even if you start to pay your large mortgage off because, you know. And when you get engaged, it's got to be with a diamond ring, right? You know who came up with the diamond thing? According to the cultural myth of the diamond engagement ring, the value of the diamond that the man uses in his proposal should be 3 months' salary. Joan came up with that. Now, I know that on naked eye tests, most people will pick a cubic zirconia as being more beautiful and glittery than a diamond, but it's got to be a real diamond, otherwise he doesn't love her. It's not true love. It's got to be a true diamond. You know who came up with that? Nobody knows. That entire cultural norm or expectation around diamond engagement rings was constructed by the De Beers company that sells diamonds. Yeah, I see Lillian's point. It's interesting how there's no mention of education in this, and I would kind of add that to it because I think that there are people that would love you to spend tons of money on education when that may or may not be in your interests. University degrees are expensive. You know that. And you may have an idea that because you get a degree, you're going to get a better job. By and large, that's actually true. By and large. Because class privileged professions like doctor, lawyer, etc., require university degrees. You cannot be a doctor or a lawyer or a psychologist without a university degree, and even more than that, like a graduate or professional degree. So universities are gatekeepers to class privilege. That said, people can do very well financially without university degrees. Community college probably offers a higher return on investment. What about suits? Like wearing suits? It can be a way of expressing dominance. Dominant people tend to wear more structured clothing. Is that what your question was, Layla? Back to return on investment. What do you think? What degrees do you think have the highest return on investment? Ones where you'll really get your money back. What degrees do you think give you the lowest financial return on investment? So that after you get your degree, you get a job that you could probably get without the degree, and then you spend years paying off the degree. A medical doctorate would have a high return on investment. I believe the highest, yes, it would be way up there. Also way up there, things like engineering is really high up there. Like engineering, yeah, engineering, medical degrees, all those professional degrees would have a pretty good return on investment, but engineering is I believe the highest. And the liberal arts degrees do have lower return on investments. Technically, you could get an excellent education in philosophy from the library and from YouTube and from the internet, if it's really just about the knowledge. However, undergrads in philosophy are common for law school applicants, and it does help people with argumentation that they would use as a lawyer. Yeah, so what do you think the return on investment is for psychology degrees? And for psychology degrees, it's pretty flat. It's pretty, I think it's pretty level overall, because there are people who get undergraduate degrees in psychology and then go on to do things that they could have done without the psychology degree, like be a ward clerk or work in a shelter. You see that. The people who earn a lot of money in psychology, like psychologists who earn in Nova Scotia, it's $230 an hour. They're doing well. Get graduate degrees that have at least a master's or a PhD. If I look at my own education, which involved like 5 years in a PhD program that was like crazy toxic, and like the financial cost of all of that, I would probably say I'm making a negative return on my investment, because teaching is quite low pay. It's very rewarding interpersonally, though. Like, I would rather take the low pay and have all the other rewards of the work. That's why I do it, but it's not for the money, sure. There are some professors who earn a lot of money, but there's kind of pyramid shaped, and there's a few on the top, and then there's a lot of lower earners who are more precariously employed. Liam is definitely not happy with this myth of the road of life. Right. And I agree with Liam. There's all kinds of like assumptions there. And you could get a sense of pressure that, gee, you should have your first kiss age 15. And if you don't, then there's something wrong with you. And, if there's something wrong with you, the answer is always to go and buy stuff, right? Buy the self-help books, and it's to buy the makeup and get new clothes. There's always, in the capitalist model, there's always a solution to this problem. We create a pressure that's a false pressure. You don't need to ever own a house. You don't need to ever own a new car. But we could create pressures where you don't feel good enough about yourself, right? Where you feel insecure. And now we get you to go spend money to get those things that you don't really need. That's kind of the game behind it. I wanted to talk about this because the textbook talks about kind of, there's a bit of a myth of the road of life. And I wanted to take it a step further and say, okay, well, where do these expectations come from? And whose interests are they supporting? And is it yours? So I hope that when you feel these social pressures, you ask yourself that question and think about it, moralize about it at the post-conventional level. We are at 12:20, and I'll end the lecture there. And I look forward to seeing you next day for our next unit. I'll stop the recording.